If you've ever poured your entire career into a place just to be told you're part of the furniture, something to be dusted off or eventually replaced, then you know exactly how this story starts. And if you've ever wondered what it would feel like to watch the people who dismissed you burn their own empire to the ground, then stick around. Let me know in the comments if you've ever had a boss who was all style and no substance, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories about getting what you're worth. My name is Sam, and for 25 years, I was the creative director, the engine, and the quiet foundation of Sterling & Cole, one of the most respected advertising agencies in the city. I wasn't just an employee, I was an architect. I built reputations, saved accounts from the brink of disaster, and crafted campaigns that became part of the cultural lexicon. I did it quietly, without fanfare, because I believed the work should speak for itself. That was my first mistake. My second was underestimating the seductive power of loud, confident ignorance. That ignorance had a name. Jax. He arrived like a grenade tossed into a library, all flash noise and disruptive potential. He was 28. With a sharp haircut, sharper suits, and a vocabulary comprised entirely of buzzwords he'd learned in a 6-month marketing course that probably cost more than my first house. He talked about synergy and ideation, disrupting verticals, and brand-first actualization. He never actually said anything of substance, but he said it with such unwavering, arrogant certainty that our CEO, a man named Markham, who was having a full-blown midlife crisis, was utterly captivated. Markham saw in Jax not just the future of advertising, but his own second chance at being young and relevant. Suddenly, my proven, revenue-generating strategies were legacy thinking. My focus on long-term brand equity was stagnant. My deep, personal relationships with clients, built over decades of trust, were dismissed as old-school networking. I was the reliable old sedan, and Jax was the flashy leased sports car. Management couldn't wait to get behind the wheel, never once thinking to check if it had any brakes. The final insult, the one that broke something deep inside me, came during the pitch for the Guardian Assurance account. Guardian wasn't just any client, they were the client. A 100-year-old insurance behemoth, conservative to its very core, with a brand identity built on stability, trust, and unwavering tradition. I had personally managed their account for 15 years. I knew their CEO, Arthur Vance, not just as a client, but as a man. We'd shared dinners, attended our kids' graduations, and built a professional trust that was worth more than any contract. Guardian Assurance was the bedrock of Sterling & Cole, accounting for nearly 40% of our annual billings. Losing them wouldn't just be a blow, it would be a death sentence. And Markham, in his infinite wisdom, decided that the key to retaining this century-old institution was to hand the pitch to the kid who thought a marketing campaign was a series of TikTok videos. The inciting incident wasn't a dramatic firing, it was worse. It was a quiet, patronizing meeting in Markham's glass-walled office. Markham sat behind his ridiculously large desk, trying to look like a titan of industry, while Jax lounged in a chair beside him, scrolling through his phone. He didn't even have the decency to pretend to be engaged. I was told that the agency was pivoting to a more dynamic, youth-oriented vision, that my experience was invaluable, but that they needed new energy on their flagship account. And then came the line that sealed their fate. Markham leaned forward, a conspiratorial gleam in his eye, and said, "Sam, we want you to mentor him, guide him, be his biggest cheerleader, show him the ropes, but let him lead the charge. We see this as a perfect synthesis of experience and innovation." I felt a stillness settle over me, a profound and icy calm. They weren't just sidelining me, they were asking me to help them do it. They were handing me the shovel and asking me to dig my own professional grave and to smile while I did it. A cheerleader, a mentor. I was to become the kindly old groundskeeper, handing the keys to the castle to the princeling who planned to tear it down. I looked at Jax, who glanced up from his phone with an expression of bored entitlement. I looked at Markham, his face a mask of desperate trend chasing, and I smiled. It was a real smile too, though they completely misunderstood its meaning. They saw compliance. They saw a team player. What they didn't see was the birth of a plan, a cold, meticulous, and utterly devastating plan. I said, "Yes, of course. I think it's a brilliant idea. I would be honored to mentor Jax. I'll be his biggest cheerleader." The drive home that evening was a blur. I don't remember the traffic or the route. My mind was a maelstrom of 2.5 decades of memories, each one sharpened into a tiny painful barb. I saw myself at 29, a junior copywriter, staying up for 72 hours straight, with old man Sterling himself to salvage the first big automotive account that put our agency on the map. I remembered the birth of my daughter, and how the entire office had chipped in to buy us a top-of-the-line crib, a gesture that made me feel like I was part of a family, not just a company. I saw the celebratory dinners, the award ceremonies, the campaigns I'd conceived in the dead of night that had become household names. The Sunrise Coffee, Your Day is Waiting campaign, which tripled their market share in 2 years. The Evergreen Bank, Roots You Can Count On campaign, which stabilized them after the 2008 financial crisis. I hadn't just worked for Sterling and Cole, I had poured my lifeblood into its foundations, and now, those foundations were being dismissed as rubble to make way for a glass and chrome monstrosity with no soul. I pulled into my garage, and just sat there in the dark, the engine ticking as it cooled. The silence of the car was a stark contrast to the screaming in my head. 25 years. I was 54 years old. In the brutal world of advertising, that's practically ancient. I'd seen it happen to others. The slow fade, the being eased out, the transition from asset to liability. I always thought my record, my results would make me immune. I believed in the meritocracy of competence. Another mistake. Competence isn't a shield. It's a threat to insecure people, and Markham was the most insecure man I had ever met. His desperation to be seen as a visionary, to be lauded in the pages of trade magazines as a disruptor, had made him blind to the very things that made his agency successful. He didn't want a business, he wanted a cult of personality with himself at the center. My wife Clara found me in the garage an hour later. She opened the car door, and the soft glow of the interior light illuminated her worried face. She didn't say anything, she just looked at me, and I knew she understood. She'd been my partner through all of it, the late nights, the stressful deadlines, the gut-wrenching pitches. She knew the names of my clients and the intricacies of my campaigns. She was the one who would listen to me vent about incompetent account executives and celebrate with me when a risky idea paid off. I finally looked at her, and the professional mask I'd worn all day crumbled. I told her everything. The meeting, the mentorship, the condescending tone, the hollow corporate speak phrases designed to soften a public execution. I felt a wave of hot, useless anger wash over me. My first instinct was to fight, to go to the board of directors, to lay out my case, my numbers, my history, to show them that Markham was driving the company off a cliff. But as I spoke, the fire began to cool, replaced by something colder and harder. I saw the flaw in that plan. The board was composed of investors who saw only the bottom line and the latest trend. They'd been seduced by Markham's presentations, full of charts projecting exponential growth based on Jax's viral strategies. They were drinking the Kool-Aid. A direct confrontation would be seen as sour grapes. They would label me as bitter, resistant to change, unable to adapt. I would become the disgruntled old employee, and they would politely thank me for my service before showing me the door with a meager severance package that would barely cover the insult. No, fighting them on their terms was a losing battle. The system was rigged against me. A theme started to form in my mind, a recurring bitter refrain. Competence isn't cheap until you lose it. They had forgotten the value of what I provided because I had made it look easy for so long. That's when the resolve solidified. It wasn't a catalyst of explosive anger, but a slow creeping frost. If they wanted to burn the place down, I wasn't going to stop them. In fact, I was going to hand them the gasoline and the matches. I wasn't going to be a victim of their incompetence. I was going to be its architect. I would become the greatest mentor Jax had ever seen. I would take his vapid, arrogant energy and aim it like a weapon directly at the heart of our most important relationship. I would let him be himself, amplified to the 10th degree. I would encourage his worst instincts, praise his most brand-destroying ideas, and help him craft a pitch so monumentally, so spectacularly offensive to the core values of guardian assurance that it would be an act of professional self-immolation, and I would do it all with a supportive smile on my face. The next day I started integrating a new subplot into my life, a B-plot that would become critical. I sought out Maya, a junior graphic designer I'd hired 2 years prior. She was brilliant, a quiet, fiercely talented artist with an intuitive understanding of visual language that you couldn't teach. But she was an introvert, often overshadowed by the louder, more self-promoting members of the creative team. She was being overlooked, just as I was. I saw a kindred spirit in her. I took her for coffee and told her I was leading a special skunkworks project for a contingency plan and that I needed her help. I told her it was completely off the books, confidential. Her eyes lit up. For the first time in months, someone was recognizing her talent, trusting her with something important. She agreed without hesitation. She would be my secret weapon, my insider, and the first member of my future team. She just didn't know it yet. The final catalyst, the one that erased any lingering doubt, came a week later. My phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. It was Arthur Vance, the CEO of Guardian Assurance. He never called my mobile. It was always a formal call to my office line, set up by assistants. This was different. He sounded casual, friendly. He said, "Arthur here, Sam. Just calling to say I'm looking forward to the presentation next month. The board is getting a little antsy about the renewal, but I told them not to worry. I told them Sam's on it. I've always been able to trust your judgment. Don't let me down." His words were meant to be reassuring, a vote of confidence, but they landed like a judgment. He was trusting me, not Sterling and Cole, me. And in that moment, I knew I couldn't let him be a casualty of my war with Markham and Jax. I had to save the account, but I also had to destroy the agency that had so thoroughly insulted me. The two goals seemed mutually exclusive, but they weren't. I just had to control the demolition. I had to let Jax crash the plane, but ensure I had a golden parachute ready not just for me, but for the client as well. I hung up the phone, a cold sense of purpose settling in my chest. The game was on. My secret plan began with a simple principle: give the fool enough rope, and he'll hang himself. My job was to be the friendly, helpful man, handing him that rope, complimenting its quality, and suggesting a good strong knot. The mentorship sessions with Jax became my theater. We'd sit in a bright, trendy conference room with a whiteboard, the kind with beanbag chairs in the corner no one ever used. Jax would pace back and forth, spewing a torrent of half-formed ideas. He wanted authenticity. He wanted virality. He wanted to connect with Gen Z, a demographic that by its very nature thinks insurance is something their parents worry about. He saw Guardian Assurance not as a symbol of stability, but as a stale boomer-centric brand that needed to be shattered and reborn from the ashes. He was a revolutionary without a cause, an arsonist in search of a fire. My role was that of the Socratic enabler. I never shot down an idea, no matter how absurd. Instead, I would nod thoughtfully, stroke my chin and say things like, "That's interesting, Jax. Tell me more. How do we push that further?" His initial ideas were bad but generic. He suggested a campaign featuring extreme sports athletes, with the tagline, "Guardian, we've got you covered." It was lazy, derivative. I knew it wouldn't win, but it also wouldn't be a disaster. It would just be mediocre. And mediocrity wasn't good enough. I needed a catastrophe, so I started to nudge him. I'd say, "It's good, Jax, but is it disruptive? Is it a paradigm shift? I feel like we're playing it a little safe, don't you?" That was the key. The accusation of being safe was like a red flag to a bull for someone like Jax. His entire professional identity was built on being the opposite of safe. His ego couldn't handle it. He scowled. "You think it's safe? Fine. What if we don't just show them living? What if we lean into the end? Make it cool, make it edgy." He started spitballing again, and I saw my opening. I fed him a line, wrapped in the language of praise. "You know, Jax, you have a rare ability to see past the established norms. Most creatives are afraid of mortality. They see it as a downer. But you see it as an opportunity for branding. That's genuinely revolutionary." His chest puffed out. "Exactly, Sam. Exactly. It's not about dying. It's about the legacy of your exit." From there it was a cascade of terrible, beautiful ideas. I just had to steer the avalanche. We moved from edgy to offensive with breathtaking speed. He proposed a TikTok challenge called the #Almost Guardian Challenge, where users would post videos of their near-miss accidents, slipping on ice, narrowly avoiding a falling object, with a trendy upbeat soundtrack. I clapped my hands together. Brilliant, user-generated content that reinforces the brand's core message in a viral, organic way. It's pure genius. I made sure to use his favorite buzzwords. This wasn't just an ad. It was a multi-platform content ecosystem. We weren't selling insurance. We were curating a conversation around end-of-life self-expression. The centerpiece of the campaign, his magnum opus of bad taste, was what he called the Legacy Collection. It was a series of NFTs, unique digital art pieces representing stylized designer tombstones. Each one would be a unique asset that came with a premium Guardian assurance policy. He had sketches made up a sleek minimalist marble slab for the modernist, a Gothic, gargoyle-adorned monument for the traditionalist with a twist. He even came up with the tagline himself, and I almost had to bite my cheek to keep from laughing out loud. Guardian Assurance. Die boldly. It was perfect. It was brand-destroying, client-alienating, career-ending perfection. I told him it was the bravest piece of advertising I had seen in my entire career. I told him Markham would love it, and he did. When we presented the concept internally, Markham was ecstatic. He saw the headlines, the controversy, the buzz. He called it fearless. He looked at me, expecting me to be hesitant, to be the voice of old-world caution. I just smiled and said, I agree. Jax has truly shattered the paradigm. This is the future. While Jax was busy designing his digital graveyard, I was engaged in my own secret project. Late at night, after everyone had gone home, I would let myself into the office and work in my old quiet space. This was where my ally, Maya, became indispensable. I told her the Skunkworks project was a more traditional Plan B campaign, just in case the client got cold feet about the bold new direction. I framed it as a necessary evil, a corporate safety net. She understood. Her job was to help me with the visual assets, to build the presentation deck, and most importantly, to keep it completely secret. Our collaboration was a stark contrast to my sessions with Jax. It was quiet, focused, and built on mutual respect. She would suggest a font, and I would listen. I would propose a color palette, and she would offer a subtle improvement. We were building something, brick by brick. The campaign I designed was the antithesis of Jax's. I called it a century of certainty. It wasn't about dying boldly. It was about living confidently. It wasn't about disruption. It was about stability. I wrote copy that spoke of promises kept, of generations protected, of a foundation so solid that it was invisible, allowing you to build your life upon it without a second thought. I used words like legacy, trust, heritage, and promise, the very words Jax had mocked as dusty and irrelevant. For the visuals, Maya and I dug into Guardian's own archives. We found old photographs from the 1920s, of the company's founders laying the cornerstone of their first building. We found film reels from the 1950s, showing families buying their first homes, secure in their future. We scanned these images, restored them, and wove them into a powerful narrative tapestry. The centerpiece was a video, set not to a trendy pop song, but to a soaring, original orchestral score I commissioned from a composer I'd worked with for years. The whole campaign was a love letter to the very idea of conservatism, of slow, steady strength in a world obsessed with fleeting change. It was powerful, it was reassuring, and it was everything I knew Arthur Vance and the Guardian board would respond to. I kept all the files on an encrypted, password-protected external hard drive, which lived in the locked inner pocket of my briefcase. My briefcase became my secret weapon, my Ark of the Covenant. On the outside I was Sam, the supportive mentor, cheering on the demise of my own legacy. But inside that leather case, I held the key to my salvation and their destruction. My foresight was my hidden leverage. I knew my client, I knew my agency, and I knew the arrogant fool they had chosen to replace me. They thought they were playing checkers, moving pieces around for immediate flashy gains. I was playing chess, and I was already 5 moves ahead. They saw an old king being led out of the castle. They didn't realize he was the one who had designed the castle, and he knew where all the secret passages were. The morning of the presentation arrived with a gray, ominous sky that perfectly matched my mood. a mixture of cold dread and electric anticipation. I picked up Jax on the way to the Guardian Assurance headquarters. He was practically vibrating in the passenger seat of my car, a bundle of nervous, unearned confidence. He was wearing a suit that was too tight and shoes with no socks, the uniform of the modern disruptor. He was rehearsing his lines, a stream of jargon-laced nonsense about leveraging mortality and gamifying the afterlife. I just nodded along, offering quiet encouragement. "That's a strong opening, Jax. Really sets a provocative tone." He beamed at me, completely oblivious. The trust of a fool is a powerful tool. We walked into the Guardian headquarters, and the contrast was immediate and jarring. Sterling and Cole's office was all open-plan spaces, glass walls, and bright primary colors. Guardian's was a temple of old money and quiet power. The air smelled of polished wood, old paper, and money that had been in the family for generations. The lobby was hushed, the floors were marble, and the walls were adorned with oil portraits of stern-faced men who had run the company since the Coolidge administration. Jax looked around with a faint sneer, as if he were a missionary arriving in a pagan land, ready to save the savages from their primitive beliefs. I, on the other hand, felt a sense of calm. I was on home turf. I knew these people. I understood their language, which was not spoken in buzzwords but in subtle nods, firm handshakes, and an unshakable belief in the importance of tradition. We were shown into the main boardroom. It was a cavernous room, dominated by a single colossal mahogany table that felt like it had been carved from a single ancient tree. Seated around it were Arthur Vance and the entire executive board of Guardian Assurance. They were a collection of men and women in their 60s and 70s, all dressed in somber, impeccably tailored suits. They looked less like a corporate board and more like a council of elders. Markham was already there, sweating slightly in his own trendy suit, trying to make small talk and failing miserably. He gave me a tense, hopeful look, and I responded with a placid, reassuring nod. "Everything is going according to plan." Jax was introduced, and he strode to the front of the room with the swagger of a rock star. He didn't seem to notice the immediate chilling drop in the room's temperature. He launched into his pitch. The first slide came up. It was a stark black background with white, sans serif text, "Death. Let's talk about it." A few of the board members exchanged uneasy glances. Arthur Vance's face was a stony, unreadable mask. Jax, high on his own supply of confidence, plowed ahead. He talked about how previous generations had a toxic relationship with mortality and how Guardian had an opportunity to lead the cultural conversation by making death aspirational. He clicked to the next slide, which showed a mood board of stylish young people laughing at a funeral. I could feel Markham's panic beginning to bubble to the surface beside me. He was shifting in his chair, his smile looking more and more like a pained grimace. This was my first move. Absolute, calculated inaction. I did nothing. I said nothing. I just sat there, my hands resting on the heavy leather briefcase in my lap, and watched the train wreck in slow motion. Jax got to the TikTok challenge. He actually played a sample video he'd made, a fast-cut montage of near misses set to some obnoxious electronic music. The silence in the room was now so profound, it felt like a physical presence. One of the older board members, a man named Peterson, whom I knew enjoyed sailing, had taken off his glasses and was slowly, methodically cleaning them with a silk handkerchief, his jaw tight. It was a gesture of supreme, controlled fury. Then came the grand finale. The Legacy Collection, the NFT tombstones. Jax presented the concept with the flourish of a magician revealing his greatest trick. He showed the mock-ups of the Gothic and minimalist digital graves. He spoke of blockchain permanence and the ultimate status symbol for your digital ghost. I risked a glance at Arthur Vance. There was no anger on his face. Not yet. There was just a look of profound, weary disappointment. It was the look of a man who had trusted someone implicitly and was now being forced to witness a stunning betrayal of that trust. He wasn't looking at Jax anymore. He was looking at me. His eyes were asking a single silent question. "How could you let this happen?" I met his gaze and held it, my expression calm, neutral. "Not yet, Arthur. Just wait." The antagonist's panic had fully set in for Markham. He was pale, A fine sheen of sweat coated his forehead. He kept clearing his throat, a small nervous tic that betrayed his rising terror. He knew, with dawning, stomach-churning certainty, that he had made a catastrophic mistake. He had bet the entire company on a fool, and the fool was delivering. The presentation ended. Jax, oblivious to the Arctic wasteland of disapproval he had created, stood there with a triumphant smile, as if expecting a round of applause. The silence that followed was the most damning indictment I have ever witnessed. It stretched for a full 10 seconds, then 20. It was a heavy, suffocating blanket of failure. Finally, Arthur Vance cleared his throat, the sound like a crack of thunder in the stillness. He looked at Jax, but it felt like he was looking right through him. He said, "Thank you, Mr. Jax. That was energetic." The word energetic was delivered with such icy contempt, it was practically an insult. The dismissal was so complete, so absolute, that even Jax finally seemed to sense that something was wrong. His confident smile faltered. Then Arthur turned his full attention to me. The disappointment was gone from his eyes, replaced by a hard, demanding glare. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His quiet, controlled tone carried more weight than any shout. He said, "Sam, I have known you for 15 years. We've weathered market crashes and celebrated industry awards together. I have built my company's marketing strategy on the foundation of your judgment. This circus we have just witnessed is not you. So I will ask you once, and I expect a straight answer. What is going on?" The entire room was focused on me. Markham looked like he was about to be physically ill. Jax looked confused, like a child who has just been told that his crayon drawing is not, in fact, a masterpiece. This was the moment. The pivot. The power shift. I didn't stammer. I didn't apologize for Jax. To do so would have been to accept partial responsibility. Instead, I calmly placed my briefcase on the table and clicked open the 2 brass latches. The sound was sharp, definitive. I looked directly at Arthur. I said, "Arthur, you're right. Sterling and Cole is currently exploring a new, more disruptive strategic direction, as mandated by our leadership. Jax is the avatar of that new vision. However, understanding the gravity of our partnership and the importance of the Guardian brand, I took the liberty of preparing an alternative, a contingency plan." I pulled out my laptop and a single sleek folder. I didn't ask for permission. I just connected my computer to the projector, and the screen behind me, which still showed Jax's ridiculous "Die Boldly" slogan, was replaced by a single, powerful image. The black and white photograph of Guardian's founders from 1923, with the words "A Century of Certainty" overlaid in a classic, elegant serif font. A collective, almost inaudible sigh of relief seemed to pass through the board members. I began my presentation. I spoke of legacy. I spoke of trust. I showed them the campaign we had built, Maya's beautiful designs bringing my words to life. I played the video, and the soaring orchestral score filled the silent room. I saw Peterson, the sailor, put his glasses back on, and his eyes were misty. I saw another board member, a woman who had inherited her seat from her father, nod slowly, a genuine smile gracing her lips for the first time. When I finished, there was another silence, but this one was different. It was a silence of respect, of deep consideration. Arthur Vance looked at the final slide, which simply showed the Guardian logo, unchanged, unadorned, and powerful in its simplicity. He then looked at me, and the hardness in his eyes had been replaced by a look of understanding and immense relief. He said one word, "This." He then turned to his board. He said, "This is the campaign. This is Guardian assurance." Then he turned back to me, his voice firm, decisive. "We will be signing a 5-year, 8-figure contract for this campaign, Sam. But the contract will not be with Sterling and Cole. It will be with you, personally. You can take it to another agency, or you can start your own. I don't care. Our business is with you, the man, not with the name on the door." It was a public execution, not of me, but of Markham and his entire pathetic vision. The talent exodus began with a single text message. As we were packing up, my phone vibrated. It was from Maya. It just said, "Whatever you do next, I'm in. Let me know where to send my resignation." An hour later, I got a call from our head of accounts, a brilliant woman named Sarah, who I'd worked with for a decade. She'd heard the rumors already. She said, "Sam, if you're starting something new, you'll need someone to manage the money. Just say the word." That night, the desperate counter came. A panicked call from Markham. His voice was shrill, unrecognizable. He offered me everything. A full partnership, the title of president, complete creative control, double my salary. He said, "Sam, we can fix this." It was a mistake. I was wrong. Jax is gone. I fired him the second he got back to the office. "Please, Sam, don't do this to me." I let him ramble, his desperation a pathetic symphony. When he was finally done, I said calmly and quietly, "No thank you, Mark. I've decided to accept a better offer," and I hung up. The final confrontation was less dramatic than you might think. There was no shouting match, no grand, theatrical showdown. There was just a quiet, pathetic fizzle. I went into the office the next day to pack my personal belongings. The atmosphere was funereal. People avoided my eyes, whispering in hushed corners. They knew. The news of the Guardian account, and its new home with me, had spread like wildfire. Markham was nowhere to be seen, locked in his office, presumably on the phone, with the board, begging for his job. As I was placing a framed photo of my family into a cardboard box, Jax appeared in my doorway. He looked like a ghost. His trendy suit was rumpled, his face was pale and puffy, and the arrogant fire in his eyes was gone, replaced by a look of raw, bewildered panic. He was just a scared kid who had been told his whole life he was a genius and was now facing his first real failure. He said, his voice cracking, "You set me up. You knew they would hate it. You let me walk in there and destroy myself. You ruined my career." I stopped what I was doing and looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time without the filter of my plan. I felt a flicker of something, not pity, but a sort of detached sadness for his spectacular lack of self-awareness. I didn't raise my voice. I spoke to him calmly, as if explaining a simple, undeniable fact of nature, like gravity. I said, "No, Jax. I didn't set you up. I encouraged you. I used your own words. I praised your vision. I told you that you were disruptive and fearless. I gave you the stage, the spotlight, and the biggest client we had. I gave you everything you said you wanted. This wasn't my failure. This was your success. You showed them exactly who you are and what you believe. It turns out they just didn't want to buy it." He stared at me, his mouth slightly agape, unable to process it. There was no defense against the truth. I had used his own ego as the weapon against him. I turned back to my box, a final, quiet dismissal. That was the last I ever saw of him. The new workplace reality began to take shape within a week. I leased a small, modest office space downtown, with big windows and great light. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. I called it Vance and Associates, a nod to the man whose trust had been my catalyst, but also a play on advance. We were moving forward. Maya was my first hire, my head of design. Sarah came on as my CFO. The senior copywriter from Sterling & Cole, a man with a poet's soul named David, joined us a week later. We were a small elite team of 4, the core of what Sterling & Cole used to be before the rot set in. We were a lifeboat, rescuing the real talent from the sinking ship. The news of the final fallout at my old agency came from a small article in an industry trade publication. Sterling & Cole had lost 2 more major clients in the wake of the Guardian disaster. The board had finally acted. Markham was out, resigning to pursue new opportunities, the classic corporate euphemism for being fired in disgrace. The agency was being acquired for pennies on the dollar by a larger soulless conglomerate, its name and legacy effectively erased. The system had corrected itself. The arrogant and the incompetent had been purged, not by my direct attack, but by the natural consequences of their own foolishness. I hadn't needed to burn the castle down. I just stepped aside and let them light the match. My vindication was not in their ruin, but in my own quiet, successful creation. We launched the A Century of Certainty campaign for Guardian Assurance, and it was a monumental success. It won every major award that year. More importantly, it resonated. It re-established Guardian's brand identity for a new generation, not by chasing trends, but by doubling down on its core truth. So here I am, in my new office. It's not as big as my old one at Sterling and Cole, but from my window I don't see the past, I see the future. My team is small, but they are the best. My clients are not just contracts, they are partners. I'm 55 years old, and for the first time in a long time, I am not just a director or a mentor or an employee, I am a founder. I reclaimed my professional life, not by fighting a corrupt system head-on, but by understanding it, by using its own weight and momentum against it. I let arrogance run its course, knowing that it always, eventually, collapses under its own vacuous weight. This story isn't just about revenge, it's about value. It's about knowing your worth when the world, and the people you work for, seem to have forgotten it. It's about understanding that real power isn't about being the loudest voice in the room. It's about being the one who built the room, and knows exactly which walls are load-bearing and which are just for show. In the end, there's a lesson here for anyone who's ever been overlooked, underestimated, or told that their experience is less valuable than someone else's flashy, unproven energy. Trends fade. Buzzwords die, but competence, real deep-seated competence, is the ultimate currency. They might think it's cheap to lose it, but as my old agency learned, the final bill will cost you everything. If you've ever felt this way, or if you've ever had to prove your own value against the odds, I want to hear about it. Like this video, if you believe in competence over charisma, leave your story in the comments below, and hit that subscribe button, because the world is full of people who need to be reminded of what real value looks like.